In this video, we're going to riff around the theme of altered perception, of intuition, of psychic, phenomena of seeing something that's happening somewhere else. And we're going to look at some of the different ways that science and evolution and what's considered outside the bounds of science and evolution may come together. Now, it's worth mentioning that everything within the framework of human language is a model of reality constructed through language. It's not actually reality. And there will definitely be superior models that integrate the box that is science and the box that is currently outside of science. Basically anything outside the box of science is currently outside of that box. And currently there is a polarity between things such as a intuitive or psychic awareness, and they're two different things. Intuition is often very astute semi-conscious pattern recognizing. And so an informed intuition can be quite accurate without the conscious mind understanding all the steps. Just like if you press an F1 key in your computer, you don't know all the codes that generate the resulting shift in the screen, but if you did, you would see that it was an intelligent link. You don't see it, you just have a sense, if you've pressed enough keys, that F1 will probably do that, and of course it does. So if we look at the evolution of reality, our scientific myth is that it all came out of nothing for no particular reason about 24 billion years ago. And there's this little dot of energy about the size of a pea, and then poof, it comes into being. And then what starts to happen is that this condensed form of energy begins to expand. And as it expands, it divides. Certain energy takes on this form, certain energy takes on this form, certain energy takes on this form. And as some of these forms engage together, you get generative equations. And then you get a new form. And then this new form interacts with this form and this form and this form, and then we get a new form. And every new form that emerges as reality separates into more and more distinct patterns, it's geometric, the relationships, because if you introduce just one new variable to the circle, let's say you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 variables. Now, within 1, 2, 3, and 4 variables, you can connect this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, and this way. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, it's not 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4. But when you add a fifth variable, when you generate a fifth distinct pattern, it has a relationship with, it's not just adding one unit to the equation, it's adding 1, 2, 3, 4. that one unit added 4 more units because it's a geometric equation. And when you add 1 more unit, that unit adds twice as much as the first 2 units because it has a relationship with all of the other patterns of energy. And this is basically life's protocol for creating an endless amount of diversity. Life is a diversity creating machine that gives birth to one thing, that combines with other things to generate a new thing, which combines with other things to generate yet new things. And 24 billion years later, we have so many trillions of distinct energy patterns that we could spend our entire life saying 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, and we wouldn't get close to the end because life is so generative of distinct energy patterns. And once you have a distinct energy pattern, it can have a relationship, a relay of energy between every other energy pattern. It could be a relationship of avoidance. It could be a relationship of unconsciousness. It could be a relationship of hostility. It could be a relationship of curiosity. But every single thing is in a relay of energy, has a relationship with every other thing, even if the extent of that relationship is tuning it out, blotting it out, being unaware of it. That is a relationship between that item. And if the other item, the other pattern of energy, is unaware of it, then it's a completely unconscious relationship through the lens, in this case, of human consciousness, the consciousness framed in language. So this is how life comes into being, is this pattern. Now, as life emerges from this core, it looks very much like a tree. Because at each of these bifurcating points where one energy becomes like this and the other energy becomes like this, you have a bifurcation. And pretty soon, as life expands, one energy becomes like this and one energy becomes like this. And then pretty soon, as it expands, one energy becomes like this, one energy becomes like this, one energy becomes like this. And if you look carefully at life in almost any arena that we can see and observe, it continually creates new and varied forms of life. Patterns of energy in a form that continues to diversify over time. So we can see this in the human species. We can see it in the rabbit species. We can see it in trees. We can see it in planets. I mean, there's a lot of planets out there, and they're continuing to diversify. Earth, in the last million years, created millions of new patterns of energy. And if you consider human beings a part of Earth, and it's rather hard to not consider us a part of Earth, because if we pretend we're not part of Earth, then we have to pretend that we're independent of Earth. And if we pretend that we're independent of Earth, it's a weak illusion, because you just cover your mouth and nostrils, and within 5 minutes, the dependency on the Earth has been proven. Now you could say, okay, we'll get oxygen tanks. Where are you going to get them? From the Earth? But we'll go out into outer space and get oxygen tanks, out there. We're not dependent on the Earth. Okay, so how are you going to get to outer space? Well, we'll build rockets. Where are you going to get the rocket? From steel. Where are you going to get the steel? From the Earth. I mean, it's a pretty flimsy illusion to think that we're in any way removed from the ecology out of which every one of us is emerging every single moment, through every breath, in the space of the earth, with the textures of the earth, with the light of the earth, with the language birthed on this earth. So we're very closely linked to our ecology. And since human beings have created more than 1 trillion patterns, human beings have created trillions upon trillions of distinct patterns of energy. Some of that we call mathematics, some of that we call physics, some of that we call products, some of that we call synthetically generated colors. But this idea of synthetic is also a little bit questionable, because when every part of humanity emerges out of Earth, which emerges out of the solar system, out of the galaxy, out of the universe, out of the multiverse, when it all emerges from the same thing, how can you make the distinction that one is natural and one is synthetic? You can say that one is made by the part of Earth that we label humans, and one is made by the part of Earth that we label natural. But if the Earth didn't generate humans, then humans could not generate artificial flavors or whatever it is. They're Earth manifesting through human being flavors rather than Earth manifesting from Earth flavors. And so this line between humans and the ecology in which we exist and out of which we emerge is a thin line, and it is constructed with language. Now, every single human being way out here upon millions upon billions, because this tree goes on almost infinitely. I say almost, but it's getting bigger every day. The tree that became planet Earth became billions of subbranches, became billions of subbranches of that, and we're way out on the skinny branches of one of the mammalian parts of the tree called human beings. But we can follow the thread biologically, chronologically, archaeologically. At any dimension, we can follow the thread between here, where we are today, and any other point in history. So we can go back to the time when we came down from the trees. We can go back when we crawled out of the water. We can go back to when we went into the water. We can go back until we were plants. We can go back until we were minerals. We can go back until we were a molten core of hot, volcanic, whatever we would want to call it. We can go back to the point before the sun formed. We can go back and back and back and back and back and back and back, all the way to the mythological Big Bang, the beginning of all of it, when existence popped and into existence. Now, at that point, when we were less than the size of a pea, along with every other possibility field, in other words, the entire possibility field of all that is, existed condensed in that pea, in that little potent dot of energy. All of our universe, all of other universes, all of our galaxy, all of other galaxies, all of our solar system, all of other solar systems, all of our planets, all of more than 1 billion life-potentiated planets, all existed in this much energy, in this much time-space. And through a series of bifurcations, we ended up where we are here and now. And 1 billion light years away, in some other time-space, other parts of life ended up over there. But we have a common parent. We have a shared history. We have a shared seed. The seed of life is that original dot of energy that has not only the potential to generate everything we know today, but in that seed of energy, in that seed of potent life, the possibility field of everything that will ever be in any universe in the next trillion years. Maybe some universes will collapse in on themselves. That is within that possibility field. Everything that can possibly be was held in the possibility field of an energy mass less than the size of a pea. And we're only just getting started. 24 billion years is one of the narratives about how far we're on this bifurcating journey, where life gets bigger, divides into distinct patterns, and then experiments and explores to learn, how does life connect this way, and how does life connect that way, and what happens if you combine potassium nitrate and this, and what if we do that, and what if we heat it first? Oh, there's an explosion, and what if we do this, and what if we do that, and what if we do this, and what if we do that? Creativity, the protocol of diversification, iteration, and experimentation is life's generative protocol. It's life's generative code. That's how life has become this big out of this big. And it's remarkable to think that there is an infinity all ahead of us in every known universe, in every unknown universe. Life keeps going out, diversifying, radiating, bifurcating, and experimenting. Now, we are a creative generation, an experiment, you might say, within that paradigm of experiment. And we're, of course, looking at all of this through language within our paradigms. So because we're into the scientific paradigm at the moment, then experiments being a core tenet of the scientific method, then we're looking at this as an experiment. But we could also look at it as a creation. We could also look at it as an expression of joy. Whatever the paradigm, we could look at it as randomness. We could look at it. We can impose and generate any paradigm we want, because so much of our consciousness emerges out of the models that we create to experience and understand reality through, beginning with the paradigm that we invent and then choose to occupy. We invent a paradigm like science or like meaninglessness or like divine plans or anything else. We invent a paradigm and we occupy the paradigm. And our model of reality takes shape, and thus our reality takes shape through the lens of that paradigm. If I move my hand this way, I see one thing. If I move it this way, I see another thing. You're looking within a paradigm. But what if you shut your eyes? And what if you tuned into the feeling and ignored the words and the images? Well, you'd have to have a paradigm for that to be an intelligent thing to do. So how are you going to invent one? Why are you going to invent one? Or why aren't you? Because most of us will just default to the paradigm of the status quo, meaning whatever the majority of people are thinking, feeling, and doing, and the way they're being, etc., today, we'll do what they're doing. I'll have what he's having, thank you very much. And that's as complicated as the analysis gets. The problem is, of course, that statistically speaking, whatever the majority is doing today has a 99% chance of being rejected in favor of adopting a new identity, a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being by the majority tomorrow. So whatever is really cool and trendy today is old hat yesterday. So whatever we're doing that's so hip and in sync is absurd, old-fashioned nonsense tomorrow. And that's the vulnerability of adopting anything, let alone whatever the majority is drinking. I'll have some of that. 95% of the known cultures in human history are already extinct along with their language. And what about all the unknown cultures? And the unknown cultures, the ones that we don't know about? Well, by the time you add all that in, you're at 99%, which is about the amount of ignorance we have about the vast majority of all that is. If we look at this tree where we are on this little dot over here, we have no idea what's going on across the universe, across the galaxy, and we have no idea what's going on the dimensions that we are not focusing on. Because one of the things we already know about human consciousness is that it's like a little flashlight, and it can perceive a certain amount within. If you shine that flashlight on a certain area, it can perceive a certain amount on a certain number of dimensions. For example, taste dimension, touch dimension, sound dimension, smell dimension, sight dimension. So we can perceive a certain amount. Our current scientists estimate that we only are aware of 50% of what our body perceives. So we're already discarding 50% of all reality to get to our point. But then that's within the observing and measuring devices that we have, which are looking on very specific dimensions. But what about all of the information that is on other dimensions than the dimensions that we're used to looking at? Well, we don't know anything about that because we're not looking through those lenses. And what about subtouch and overtouch, meaning our bodies can absorb certain intensities of touch, but there are intensities of touch that go beyond, that are more intense than our bodies can notice and are less intense. And what about sound? Our ears can hear a bandwidth of sound like so, but sound goes on infinitely above and below that bandwidth. So we're only perceiving less than 1% of all the sound that is in our space. Because the other sounds that we're not perceiving and measuring are the sounds that are too low. Like the Earth is emitting sound. Some sound has a 2-mile wavelength. It's too low to hear. Some sound has a 5-mile wavelength. Some sound has a 20 trillion mile sound pattern of energy, and we can't hear it. We don't have the instrumentation. So we can't say if that sound is getting up. We just know there's sound below what we can hear, and there's sound that's above what we can hear. And what about light that's above, ultraviolet, etc.? And what about light that is we don't see because it's really dark light? It just doesn't show up on our little readout called eyes. It's there, but it doesn't show up. So we're seeing what consciousness is it's, particularly human consciousness, it's this flashlight that shows 50%, if we're paying attention, of what our observing and measuring devices pick up in our dimensions, the dimension of our observing and measuring device. Because there could be a Sith observing and measuring device that measures Sith energy. But we don't know what Sith energy is because we can't experience it because we lack an observing and measuring device to do so. So it doesn't exist for us. But in this exact space where we're shining our flashlight, if instead of 5 observing and measuring devices, we had 200 million observing and measuring device. This one's measuring sight above our ability to see. This one's measuring light frequencies below our ability to pay attention to. This one's measuring heat things. This one's turning this into this. This one's turning this. This sense here is measuring the number of right angles in the space and counting them. This one is measuring how many mathematical patterns are above average in the space. This one, and these are just the things that we kind of can grasp that we know we don't know. Then there's all the things happening in this space that we don't know that we don't know. That's why reality is really, really big, and it's just getting started. And so we identify, our consciousness identifies with our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being at this point on the tree. But there are innate links, mathematically speaking, between this dot and every single thing that exists. Why? Well, first of all, over the next 10 trillion years, we're only at 24 billion years, over the next 10 trillion years, reality is going to get exponentially bigger than it is today. What's actually out there will be more diverse, more complex, more evolved than what's here today. Now, our particular reality may or may not be heading in a trajectory to disappear into a black hole. But within the domain of the tree, which just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more varied, The possibility field is moving into the probability field, is moving into the actual field. Reality is getting bigger, more complex overall. And there is a thread that links everything about reality to every other thing about reality. And one of the common threads, among many, is the common seed. Because you could be up in the skinny branches of this tree here, and you could pretend that you're an isolated part of the tree, because you're not paying attention to the rest of the tree, because you've got an ego, an identity that says this is me and that's not me. And my lens is only this big, so I can only look at this one little bit. But anyone who stands back and looks at the whole tree, if you ask them, is there a relationship between this little circle here who doesn't know how they fit in and the root at the Big Bang? An informed person will say, of course, there are many, many things that connect this identity out here to the seed of the tree. Like what? Well, how about shared physicality? If matter didn't exist at all, then the universe wouldn't exist and neither would the identity. So matter links them. So the creation of matter, which is part of the emergence of our known universe, gave birth to both the person who feels separate and every other thing in the universe. And so there is a link. Matter links them. How about the gravitational constants? If someone in Ethiopia drops an apple and it falls to the ground, and someone in the United States drops an apple and it falls to the ground, and someone's hand falls down to the ground, gravity, a protocol of relating between energy, links those two people who may never meet, who may not even know about each other's existence, because they're on different parts of the tree. But they're both following the same law. There is an equation that links person A's hand and person B's hand across thousands of years and thousands of miles. What else links them? Well, if the slime had not developed, if the slime experiment had failed, right? It's two bits of slime getting together and they create even more slime. Now there's 3 bits of slime and they create even more slime, right? If they said, nah, if slime A looked at slime B and said, nah, I'm not in the mood, then the third slime doesn't come along. And after slime A and slime B gets old and deteriorates, then that's the end of slime. And when slime doesn't evolve, then lichen and algae don't continue to evolve, and ferns and other plants don't evolve, and animals don't evolve, and mammals and they don't. Every one of those had to say, how about it? And the counterpart in that creative generative dance said, yes. How about it? And the answer was yes. Because when the first crocodile looked at the first crocodile and said, how about it? If the answer had been no, I'm not in the mood, no more crocodiles, no more fish, no more, it all stops. So there's obviously a link in causality, if you're going to use that paradigm, back to slime. And you can't have slime emerging without a planet, without an atmosphere conducive to slime. If the atmosphere was forming, right? The atmosphere is getting together. How about we form partly oxygen, partly helium, partly this? And if they said, nah, I don't want to do that. Let's not hang out. You go over there, oxygen, I'll go over here. We're just not going to get together and form a mix. Well, then the atmosphere conducive to slime doesn't get a chance to propose. The slime doesn't have a chance to do its thing because other parts of life didn't do their thing. And so you realize that the entire human civilization, every human civilization, collapses if one bit of slime didn't feel like saying, how about it? And another bit of slime didn't say yes. Now, was that a human conversation? Of course not. There wasn't language. But if those molecules, if those atoms, if those relationships didn't fit, then evolution stops. If you go back in time and cut the evolution of slime, you erase everything that comes out of that, including every human being on the planet today. So all of that can be traced back to the seed, back to the Big Bang, back to that little P of energy. And we have our little tunnel vision of what is real, which is a very, very narrow tunnel. For the most part, we are not focused on the past or the future. We're focused on what's being read in right now. For the most part, we're not focused on what it feels like to be another planet or a piece of algae or even another race on our planet. We're focused on what it's like to be me, to be our race and gender and this. We're self-absorbed. That's the nature of egoic consciousness. I'm me, and I'm the one who thinks this, who feels this, who says this, who does this, and is this way. That's me. And I'm not all those other things. Those are different. That's not me, that's not me, that's not me. The earth isn't me, the water isn't me. I'm this. And that's the delusion in many ways of the isolated ego. Because the isolated ego stands on the shoulders of trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of equations, trillions and trillions and trillions of choices, trillions and trillions of meetings. We can't even say how many things had to go a certain way in order for us to be here, pretending that we're disconnected from everything else. But in reality is one giant tree. It's one giant possibility field wherein every single thing that is possible to happen will happen at some point in time, in some place, in some configuration of dimensions. That's a possibility field. And a possibility field moves into a probability field, moves into an actuality. So we're here in the actuality of this point in space-time. But we are a part of a net. We're part of a web. We're part of an equation of possibility. And when you have a possibility field and you delete one possibility in the possibility field, let's say you have the possibility field of every number that can be. So you're already at an infinite number of numbers because, at 10 trillion, 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 you just have to add the number 1. Now there's 10 trillion, 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 and 1, and Now you add 2. It just goes on and on forever. Now, possibility fields are really, really big. But if you just take 10, the number 10, and delete it from that possibility field, the mathematical possibility field of numbers, the entire possibility field changes. If every time you get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you can't go to 10, you either stop all life in that metaphor, or the possibility field collapses substantially, because that 10th item repeats itself trillions upon trillions of time. And the more it does, the more the absence of one possibility is felt. If you delete one digit, one unit from an entire possibility field, the field collapses. So we are part of the possibility field. If we delete you, me, the human race, and try to create the possibility field of all that is without that, it's a very different reality. Because just as if you change the gravitational constant in Ethiopia, you also change the gravitational constant on Mars, you're changing the code that says that the Earth is this dense and is spinning at this speed, and within that framework, there's X units of gravity, of attraction to Earth. Well, that formula applies throughout the universe as we know it. Now, this force can distort it, but the underlying constant is the same. So if it changes for the one person in Ethiopia, they pray to God, please let my apple rise to the top. And God just changes the gravitational constant from 2.67 per unit of mass to 2.68. Okay, now the apple falls up, right? Well, apples all across the universe start falling up. People start floating off into the sky. Cows start floating up. Water starts floating off in the sky. Suddenly, it's a very different reality. So what changes in one portion, particularly of a fractal reality like ours, changes in other areas. Now, if you look at how shaman in tribal settings talk about how they intuit and divine things that the normal human identity couldn't figure out, how do they do that? Well, one of the things they often describe is a ritual of dissociating from their physical body and identity, their consciousness. Like the flashlight, they stop tuning it and focusing it on their physical senses at this moment in time. And they go back along the tree. Here they are, right here. They go back until the time when they were one people. Maybe they go back to, it's our understanding today that, every single person on the planet today emerged out of people on the African plains. Maybe 10 people. We're all descendant from 10 people, So maybe they follow that tree in time space through the body. Now, one of the things that we see over and over again, which is somewhat reinforcing, is that reality is fractal in nature. We see these same basic patterns occurring at very big levels and very small levels and very, 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 very small levels. But it's as above, so below. As without, so within. As within, so without. There's a relationship between one part of reality and another part of reality, and it's a fractal relationship. Similar patterns with variations occurring over and over and over again. So it's not surprisingly that it's not surprising that the universe looks like this giant expanding tree of possibility, and we look around and we look at what our planet is creating, and it's trees. This is not some totally foreign object, and many of the things around us feel very familiar. We understand them because they're going on inside our body, they're going on outside our body, they're going on the planet as a whole, they're going on in the entire universe, and so they feel familiar. We recognize the patterns. So a shaman may go back to the first tribe of humans, and then they can their consciousness can follow a different path. What if instead of going north on the African plains, they had made for the coast? Okay, that's part of the possibility field. It's part of the probability field. So if they're trying to get information, to get signal and data from a part of reality that is different from the path that they and their people have taken, they may move that way. What if they go back to the time where human beings separated from water molecules? Slime and this stuff came up out of the ocean, and this one stayed in the water. Well, if you want to know what's going to go on in the next storm, when is the next storm? Do we have a safe crossing? Well, if you travel back in time to where a part of you that could have gone off this way, a part of you that did go off that way, because we're all interconnected, and you feel you go back to when you were water, or when you could have been water, and you feel that. You develop a rapport. You understand the patterns while retaining a sliver of your human awareness to observe it and say, aha, okay, the water knows what it's going to be doing over the next 48 hours. Now I know, because I went back to the part of me, the brother, the sister, the relative, that is, that was, that will be water. And I get the data from my relatives, because anyone looking at this tree understands that we are all interconnected, that every single branch connects to a bigger branch and bifurcates to a smaller branch, bifurcates to leaves, right? It's all connected. It's part of one system of energy. All of reality is part of one system, but certainly the planet is very easy to experience as one system of reality. So I go back to the time when I was, when I could have been, when I will be water. And I ask the water. I'm interested in these large phenomena. The water says, oh yes, we love those huge waves. They're so exciting and interesting. Yes, there'll be one in 48 hours because this happens and that happens, and when this and this and this happens, and then there will be a great movement of water. The shaman comes back in the body and says, within the next 48 hours, there may be a tsunami. And of course can look at their source and, maybe we're checking the wrong ocean, right? Are we in the right area, et cetera? And so there's a skill of picking up the phone and calling other parts of reality. But the skill is becoming one with it. Now, this is the price that we pay for a sociopathic dissociation. Meaning if you want to cause unnecessary harm and imbalance to part of reality, you can't do that and be connected to that part of reality, or it feels like you're cutting off your own hand. You can ask a sociopath who will gladly blow up women and children to take a knife and cut off their own hand, and usually they won't do it. They'll say, oh, that doesn't feel good. And you say, why? Well, that's me. But an empath, you ask them to saw off the arm of another person, and they say, I can't do it. It doesn't feel good. Why? Because I understand that I'm connected. I understand that I'm connected to the person. I know what it would feel like, and I don't want to do that. And so we have an honoring of the relationship, of the interconnectivity. And of course, empaths who understand that they are emerging moment by moment out of their ecology are upset with cutting down more and more trees to do things that are in and of themselves unhelpful and unhealthy, when you could be doing something else. Why? Because they feel the smoke in the air, and they also feel what it's like through imagination or tactile sensation. They understand the numbers of animals that will be killed in that fire. They understand that, and it doesn't feel good because they honor the relationship. They understand that that's part of reality, and I'm part of reality. We are family. And to cut off this branch to benefit me over here, the tree will get unbalanced, and maybe the entire tree will collapse, because I'm not honoring the relationship between one part and another. And so we have a crisis. We have a problem. So this is the phenomena, the paradigm of the tree of creation, the tree of reality. And any scientist, the most rational scientist imaginable, will follow the link from the present moment in space-time all the way back to the Big Bang. And obviously, when every single living thing in the entire possibility field of reality lived within that energy, the less than the size of the P, you could say that was the parent. That was where we all began. And so if we were all one family, and divided and divided and divided and divided, then at the center of the tree is that original source, that original core of the tree, out of which everything else happens. And so a shaman that wants to, for example, understand plant medicine may go back in their evolutionary thread of consciousness through their own biology and find the time when they were a plant, and find the time when they were this element or this element, and remember, put back together, this plant is good at this and it's bad at this. So the plant told me, apply me like this and this, and I will help cure this, this, and this. And they did it, and there was a result. So we're all part of one species. We're all part of one earth. We were once minerals. We are still minerals. All things are connected. In truth, they are fragmented in the illusion and delusion of consciousness. Because consciousness takes the one and cuts it in half, up and down, black and white. It cuts it in half again, right and left. Red and brown. It cuts reality in half with words. And it just keeps cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting. Cutting until we have a 64,000 word vocabulary. And then we cut some more by combining 64,000 words this way, and then this way, and then this way, and then this way, and then this way. And by the time that we're done, it appears that nothing has anything to do with anything else. It appears that we are separate because we have severed our connection through a sea of language. And we place ourselves here as a distinct pattern in tension, often in opposition with every other part, with every other pattern that is. When in fact, we all emerge out of one seed, out of that one initial moment. And there are literally millions of threads of energy that connect us. Now, in the language of sight, let's say we want to connect this dot to over here. In the language of sight, to connect one part of the tree with another part of the tree, one planet to another planet, we have to use the speed of light, because that's the parameter within which we're making the connection. We're visually looking to connect the dots. We're visually. So we're limited to the speed of light. But we're already discovering various particles and relationships that seem to be faster than the speed of light. And we don't know how those relationships are honored. But it makes sense if you look at this tree that at some level it's all one tree. At some level it's all one. Not at the level of language, not at the level of human consciousness, but if we take off that mask of language and separation and consciousness, which we cannot pierce because it's a veil that the ego cannot go beyond, but if we release and relinquish and sacrifice our distinct, separate identity, our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing, in order to connect with something more primary, more original, more from the original seed. Well, there may well be a consciousness of the one that instantly knows this part and this part at the same time, because it's in both places at the same time. And certain particles connected through that source energy may break the barrier of time. Time no longer exists, because if you see, feel, and know and are aware of everything all the time, completely, time stops existing. There's no more time. The time is when you see a small dot, and then you see this small dot, and then you see this small dot. You move through. When your consciousness is smaller than the space through which you are aware and navigating, you have the experience of time. It exists all at once, but you navigate it, just like a laser navigates a CD. You could just look at this CD and say the entire movie is right there. It took no time at all to watch the movie. Bing, I've watched the movie. But it's not an enjoyable experience for human consciousness. No, I want to watch this frame, and then this frame, and then this frame, and then I want to see this, this, and this, and this in this particular order. And so now, glance at the CD, done. Now that becomes a 3-hour sequence. Oh, this scene, then this scene, then this scene. Because the laser is very small, looking at a very tiny bit of it at one time, and then this bit, and this bit, and this bit, and this bit, and this bit. So time decreases the more consciousness expands, the more we perceive in a moment. So you can adjust time by adjusting awareness. You can experience an entire lifetime in certain lucid dreams. because you drill into very, very intense details at very high processing speeds, so that 15 minutes later you experience several years of intense experiences. When we have an awareness, a connection, a vision, an intuition that connects something with someone that we care about over here, with someone we care about over here, the intensity of feeling creates a certain amount of connection, an orientation of awareness, because it's like a heightened sense. The more we feel, the more heightened sense we have, the more we feel. And so we can pick up on things in someone very close to us that we couldn't pick up, that we have no feeling for. And what we have feeling for is what we own as a part of us. So the smaller our identity, I'm just this little me separate from everything else, the smaller our identity, the less we have feelings for. Empathy is the acknowledgement of a relationship between the other and the self. And one of the reasons that sociopathic isolation and other forms of pathology are contagious is that to honor and feel a connection with someone and have the connection dishonored and disowned in return feels painful to the person who's empathic. But it doesn't feel painful to the person who's sociopathic, because they've already disconnected from the part of themselves, their own empathic brain, that could honor the connection. So even though their empathic brain is in great pain, they don't feel it because it's under an anesthetic. It's been turned off and iced with the reptilian brain. And so only one person is feeling the pain that two people are actually experiencing, but one person has an anesthetic. One has ice on the nerve of consciousness that would acknowledge the connection. And at a certain pain point, most people in an empathic state also have to put ice on the brain to stop going insane, to stop breaking down in grief at the dishonor that's being shown to them by a part of themselves that they honor and feel, but that does not honor and feel them in return. So the hypothesis, the conjecture here, is that when things that seem to be separate have awareness of one another and connect in some way, that they are actually traveling back through the tree of possibility to a point where they were once connected. And then they're traveling down this point where they diverged. And through that shared link, through the shared sap in the tree, are picking up certain amounts of data based on their skill and ability. And this is the description of every shaman. They became an animal and then looked through this. They became the wind and looked through this. They let go of the human identity. They go back to source. They follow the different paths laid out in the probability field, the possibility field, the actuality. They become what it is that they want to understand or influence. They gather and transmit energy in that space Then they come back following the tree to where they are here and now. And they use that information. And what allows them to travel that doorway fluidly is empathy, is love and goodwill to each part of the self, to each part of the tree. Because when you bang on the door of a part of yourself and say, I want this information now, I'm in a hurry, I have no respect for you, you meet a wall, you meet a defense. And that becomes the basis for a civil war, for a war within the psyche, within the planet, within whatever level of self that you're looking at. But when you travel through and offer gifts and honor, and thank you for sharing this with me, and thank you for sharing with this, and thank you for sharing this with me, and here's where we end up. You've got tremendous fluidity to travel throughout the entirety of the possibility field, to learn, to explore. And each part has their rules, their cults, their focuses, their views. And at each point you can honor or dishonor those forms, those rules, those protocols. And one can have freedom to travel throughout the self when there is love and empathy and a lack of judgment, because judgment creates separation. And one can explore the entirety of the terrain and come back with more insight for collaborative vision. And this is what a healer does, is they get in touch with all the parts of themselves, the sick parts and the medicine, and bring back a remedy without creating a polarizing dynamic. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.